新年快乐！我跟你讲，这一集应该算是我们好机车最夸张、最精彩的 ，because this is going to be the most incredible story you have ever heard us report on. Real talk. This is so wild, some of you might even 退订阅 because you're gonna think I've completely lost my mind. But all of our 铁粉已经知道，好机车 is all about 好风车. And after spending almost 24 hours of digging, researching, and watching interviews and footage, I believe this might be the most authentic non-human life form confession the entire internet has ever seen.
I'm not ready.
So, 准备 copious amounts of 爆米花, and I'm sure you already know what's coming next. Or do you? Introducing Saley, the ultra-convenient eSIM service. Real talk, I always keep the Saley eSIM app installed on my phone, so that when I hop on a flight abroad to go DJ, keeping in touch with my family is the last thing I have to worry about. No more forgetting to activate roaming, scrambling for public Wi-Fi, or hassling with physical SIM cards accidentally bending them when trying to swap them out. With Saley eSIM, it is super simple, yo. Just open up the Saley eSIM app, click a few times, and you're all good, baby. And if you travel a lot like me, then you know that staying connected is really important. And Saley eSIM makes sure that you are always connected, giving you 24/7 安全感很舒服哦. Although, I'm not really sure if it works in space though. Saley eSIM offers affordable pricing, exceptional compatibility, and 24/7 online support. So if you encounter any issues, there's always someone there to help. Plus, you only need to download the app once, son. That means when it's time to purchase a new plan, there's no need to re-download or log in again. So say goodbye to swapping physical SIM cards when traveling abroad, because you leveling up, baby, with Saley eSIM. And if you visit my special link down below at saley.com/haojiiji to download the app, then you can enter in the promo code haojiiji to get 15% off. So if the next time you end up getting abducted by aliens like Star-Lord, you can actually call your mom first and let her know exactly where you're going, because you'll have the Saley eSIM app installed. So make sure you install the Saley eSIM app and give it a try, son. Alright, so now that you've got Saley eSIM installed, let's say it together. 代誌大條. So do you remember our previous UAP episode where a group of whistleblowers went to testify in front of Congress that non-human intelligent life exists? And at that time, everyone was like, oh shit, 代誌大條.
Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
Well, this clip was confirmed to be real and authentic as fuck. As a pilot who captured it, Commander David Fravor also came forward to confirm it.
In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. When we launched off Newitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. There, the controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down a small, saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed. And they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar.
And in conclusion, this hearing basically revealed to the American public that the US military had been ratioed by aliens and there wasn't a goddamn thing they could do about it.
Really? That's what we've come to? I'm starting to lose faith.
And then, after this David came to testify, another David, aka Dave, this guy had a ranking and security clearances way above the first David. Dave said a lot of wild shit, but there was one tiny problem. He hadn't actually seen anything with his own 2 eyes.
My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard and Reserve, at the rank of major, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower, following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and many of my various colleagues.
Now, however convincing he might have been, Dave was viciously attacked online, being accused of engaging in hearsay fuckery. So in response, Dave tried to convince those who had actually seen aliens with their own two eyes to come forward and share their story. But after they saw what happened to him and others, acts of terror and death threats included, their response,
No, hell no!
So then, Dave decided to contact someone that all these whistleblowers had in common.
Dr. John Blitch, a former Green Beret and Special Mission Unit troop commander, joins us to discuss how he came to know Jake Barber and why he believes what Jake and his team have told him about their astounding crash retrieval activities. But is Jake Barber who he says he is? And are his allegations true?
Enter in Dr. John Blitch, a former Green Beret who holds a master's in mathematics and computer science, as well as a PhD in cognitive psychology, which keep that in mind because it'll come in handy later on.
In general, when I went into Special Forces at first and commanded those two A teams, those detachments, our mission was to parachute or insert behind enemy lines, either parachutes or scuba dive or whatever it is to get in there, and then operate behind enemy lines. It was the Cold War. Enemy line was pretty much the Iron Curtain, Soviet Union. I was in 10th Group, so we were oriented on Europe. Each Army Special Forces group is geographically oriented. So 5th Group's Middle East, 7th Group is Central South America, 1st Group is Pacific. You know, everybody has their areas and we're language trained in those areas. And so that was the general idea.
This guy is a badass in his own right, involved in countless number of special access missions, and also being the project manager for one of the most secretive US government organizations, DARPA, where John was not only the first one in the military to test GPS, but was also the first to deploy tactical robots in modern warfare.
In terms of like your work in the government, were you ever part of any UAP related program?
No.
Okay.
Now, I was read in on a number of SAPs, special access programs. There's operational SAPs, then there's technological SAPs. An operational SAP is obviously intended to protect that operation. And then when the operation is wrapped up and done, that doesn't mean you stop protecting it because it might involve assets or people that are still undercover. Technological SAPs tend to last longer, right? Because look at the F-117. That stuff was developed back in the 70s. And we used it in the Gulf War 20 years later with wonderful effect. Arguably, we reduced that from a 2 or 3 year war to 100 days.
Yeah.
And that technology played no small role. Neither of those, any of those that I was read into had anything to do with UAP that I know of.
So although he was involved in a lot of secret and special programs, to his own admission, John was never actively involved in any UAP missions. But for some weird reason, UAP Dave wanted this guy to talk to those who had.
He wanted to encourage others to come out, not just to benefit him, right? It helped him because a lot of the criticism against him was, hey, look, you didn't see a craft, you didn't see an alien, how can you be claiming this, right? And so it's just the classic narrow-minded people that can't, embrace information outside their narrow, soda straw. So Dave reached out to me and said he knew some other folks who did have firsthand knowledge, but they were very worried because of the backlash that could be taken against them. And so, he told me that they just needed a little bit of leadership. They needed to hear some of your stories and convince them that it's going to be okay and that the alternative is way worse. And we see this all the time where people keep things buttoned up for years and then on their deathbed, they come clean and it's a sort of a horrific thing. So he asked me to meet with these guys because at least one of them was a tier 1 operator.
Okay, so UAP Dave needed people who actually saw this shit with their own 2 eyes to back up his story. But why in the world would UAP Dave want these whistleblowers to talk to John? Well, if you remember, I mentioned earlier that John has a PhD in cognitive psychology, which basically tries to understand how the mind processes information, makes decisions, and most importantly, remembers things. In short, John is a licensed brain detective, which means not only can he help these guys remember important details about what they saw, but he can also spot a fake or a liar from a mile away.
When Jake is telling you his story, what was going through your mind as he's telling this to you?
I always look for, and I used to teach my cadets to look for inconsistencies. This generation of cadets are really in a difficult position, right? Because with the magic of the internet, you have all this information and you got to sort out information versus disinformation, and you got to go through the A1 source and information to the F6 or whatever. Very, very difficult. And so I was looking for inconsistencies across all of them. Didn't find them. Didn't find any inconsistencies. Everything would track.
And in the end, on a boat over some beers, John ultimately met up with this episode's hero, Jake Barber. And according to John, although he couldn't verify his Air Force credentials, which by the way was an undercover identity, Jake was legit as fuck.
There's a difference between healthy skepticism, scientific skepticism, which should not only be tolerated, it should be embraced and addressed. But some of this is just classic ignorance. Like there's no dust below the helicopter. Dude, the helicopter's 150 feet above ground. They're out of ground effect. And the vast majority of that desert floor is scrub. It doesn't move. I've slept on that surface. It's like hard as a rock. Come on, dude. You're just showing your ignorance. That's all that is.
So this footage is what John is defending, and it has been going really viral lately as Jake Barber secretly filmed this while he was on a mission to retrieve UAPs.
So it's terrifically stressful. And so that's why all of those guys have taken extreme risk on behalf of our country. And yet here are people trying to tear them down. I'm not okay with that. It's an enormous risk. And you can imagine why you have to do that. If you want to stay ahead of your adversaries, you need to know where their WMD are, right? And so it's a real challenge. My hat is off to both of those guys, Don Paul and Jake, for the risk they accepted by going non-official cover. And you can see, plenty of there was a Mission Impossible movie it's all about the knock list and how important that is. And it is very, very important.
By the way, make sure you go to the original podcast and show Matt at the Good Trouble Show some love, because his interview with John is very obviously getting suppressed by YT. So give him a like, a comment, and subscribe if you want.
Do it. Do it!
Alright, so needless to say, the doctor is all in on Jake Barber. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering,你一直在讲这个 doctor, 但是呢，我到底要看 UAP, yo? Well, I gotta go home. The doctor's role in this is extremely important, because what you're about to see next just might make you 退订阅的好汽车. I said it before and I'll say it again. 代志大条. Okay, so I have a confession to make. Last week, back when we previewed this episode, we originally wanted to release it then, but then we ran into a bit of trouble. Because right when we were about to drop it, News Nation decided to block anyone from even using 10 seconds of their footage on their channel.
Fuck.
So I had to get crafty and use AI to recite a transcript of exactly what Jake said. And the link to the original video is down below. So with that out of the way,
Hold on to your butts.
My name is Jacob Barber, and for the last 30 years, I've worked for the U.S. government and its private partners in both an official capacity as an enlisted man in the United States Air Force and in a non-official capacity for the broader intelligence community as a contractor. Over the last 3 decades, my work has been very diverse and has included the recovery of downed UAP of non-human origin. I'm pleased to share that as of a couple of weeks ago, I have fulfilled a promise to our friend David Grush by getting myself into a skiff with Congress, and I have provided top-secret SEI testimony on the subject matter of UAP. With this behind us, I'm pleased to be at a place where I can share information with the public. So with that, let's talk.
Now remember back at the first UAP hearing where Dave requested to meet in a skiff with congressmen and women in order to reveal what the Pentagon was up to regarding aliens? Well, Jake was also in that skiff right alongside him.
Do you think Congress is being misled or deceived about what is secretly known about non-human intelligence, alien life, and engagement with this?
It's clear they don't have the full story.
What's being held back?
Just about everything, but there's another problem. I don't even know that they're giving it proper attention to begin with. So, unfortunately, Congress is very ignorant when it comes to the subject.
So very recently, the Pentagon spokesman assured press reporters in a Pentagon briefing that there is no evidence of extraterrestrial engagement with planet Earth. Is that true?
No, that's not true. Now, they like to hang their hat on some key words there. Extraterrestrial. So that means outside of the planet Earth, and that is yet to be determined by my best understanding.
So you're saying you know for a fact there are aliens?
Yes, 100%.
Now this conversation is really interesting because when we say extraterrestrial, we're already implying that non-human life forms must be outside of Earth. But what if we all looked one very obvious thing? What's inside of Earth? The ocean. Could that be where aliens actually live?
To ruin the surprise.
So tell me about the moment when you realized that you were involved in a retrieval of non-human technology, alien tech.
It became very clear the first time we recovered something that was non-human in origin, that it was precisely what we were dealing with. Our communications changed, and our communication process and procedure was modified. It was also clear to everyone on the team that what we were dealing with was something unexpected versus expected. Just visually looking at the object on the ground, you could tell that it was extraordinary and anomalous. It was not human.
How close did you get?
Well, I was a helicopter pilot and I operate with a 150 foot to 200 foot long line, so I got within 150 feet of this object.
What did you see?
I saw an egg, a white egg.
How large was the object?
I would say approximately 20 feet plus or minus a little bit, about the size of a large SUV.
Did it have any seams?
No.
And it was pure white?
It was like pearly white, like a metallic pearly white, the best I could assess.
I mean, what you're describing sounds like something out of a TV show.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to share some images with you, and you can see one of these flying in the sky if you like, in broad daylight.
So you actually saw it in the sky before it?
No, not this one. But in our new venture, we've already begun work, and we're capturing data of the exact same craft flying in the sky.
How did you know that that egg-shaped object was non-human in origin?
Now, visually, after seeing all kinds of things in my past, it was clearly something that was ridiculously looking. It's inconsistent with anything I'd ever seen before. I can also tell you that the reaction by my team, who was very experienced, was atypical. We modified our entire process for recovery that night. Our communication process changed. We all knew we were dealing with something extraordinary. In addition to that, it has also been verified by me, by high-ranking members of the UAP task force, that what we recovered that night was in fact known as non-human intelligence aircraft.
原来外星人跟我们台湾人一样，很喜欢加蛋 except their 蛋 can fly. You remember that infrared video of the moving orb captured by David Fravor? That kind of looks like an egg, doesn't it?
The egg, as we're referring to it, is known by many others who have encountered this type of craft in our atmosphere, outside of our atmosphere, both during the day and at night, all over the place.
You got a good look at this object, didn't you?
Yeah.
Was there any visible propulsion system on it?
No, not what we would know. There's no engine.
Was there a thermal signature?
There was no thermal signature.
It wasn't hot?
No.
No? According to the general laws of thermodynamics, if an object is flying or driving an engine, it's going to show heat, isn't it?
Yes.
How do you think that object was being propelled?
That's a great question that we're looking forward to exploring with our new venture.
Okay, so Jake saw a giant flying egg, the end, open and shut case, right?
Wrong.
Well, it turns out he saw much more than that.
There's another craft that we recovered that I can talk about. This craft was referred to as an 8-gon. An 8-gon is basically a disc-shaped object that, when viewed from the top, has 8 different symmetrical sections delineated by some form of ridge. We actually called the egg Nanus, like from the Mork and Mindy, because it looked ridiculous. It's funny when you look back at what may have been the motivation for the 1970s TV show. Where else would they get such a ridiculous idea for a character like Mork from Mork, right? You have Mork who flew to Earth in an egg. It surely supports the idea that some like to think there was a PR program that utilized our fascination with Hollywood and television to blur the lines between actual fact and fiction. creating what you could call a weird hybrid of fact and fiction.
Wakarikon. This interview is nearly 3 hours long, over 2,000 lines of pure words, and what you've seen so far is just the sane part of the interview, the low-level kwatang. But what you're about to see next is even something that I struggle to believe if it's true, because it comes straight out of every sci-fi movie you have ever seen.
This is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life I'm about to share with you, so bear with me. This is, for me, when it became clear. As I get closer to this pick site, I start feeling odd. I start feeling extremely emotional. And the closer I get, the more the emotion starts to overwhelm me. And I feel a sense of my mother. I don't know how else to explain it. I feel this intense hybrid of sadness and happiness and beauty. And once it was just me and that object in between the pick and the drop site, there's about 20 miles in between, I felt like something was inside of me. I felt like I was possessed by the most beautiful spirit I'd ever been possessed by. And
Now, as you can see, Jake perfectly fits the woke left's toxic masculinity archetype. Born in the 70s, tall, bald, and a hardened combat veteran. Stereotypically speaking, he is the one person you would least expect to cry on national TV. Ladies and gentlemen, expectations have been massively defied. And if you ask me, this is way more convincing than any footage of a flying UAP.
But there was a sense of sadness at the same time. It was a very feminine energy, I'll tell you that. It felt like the spirit of God, but not in any masculine sense that I had ever felt. It was like, again, the feeling of my mother and my daughter and beauty. And it wasn't like, sorry, it was like a frequency that I was connected with.
So let's recap, shall we? A Special Forces bald tough guy co-signed by a Green Beret mine detective was undercover as an Air Force mechanic while secretly being recruited into a super secret special missions program tasked with retrieving alien spacecraft, aka flying eggs. And somewhere along the way, one of these flying eggs initiated a spiritual connection with him that reminded him of his mama, melting away all his toxic masculinity into a tear-filled IV drip.
That's crazy, man.
And if you think that's crazy,
I do not believe there was a being in that craft. I've come to understand now, after being involved with other parts of the programs that are tested on the range, that there is a known and researched emotional or psychic component, what we call a psionic component, to the research and development of the UAP program. Coincidentally, shortly after that, I was led in support of another particular part of the program, which deals directly with looking at this piece right here. It involves the summoning side and the operation side of these non-human craft, which has to do with consciousness, or at least a field of consciousness, that perhaps humans can tap into and maybe all beings in the universe can tap into.
And now, according to the Egghead Special Forces guy with a permanent Sashao look plastered on his face, you can summon and even control flying eggs with your mind.
Ha! Gay!
A Zinnic person is someone with a predisposition for extratemporal abilities and sensitivities, someone who has a fantastic intuition. In the program, there was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps UAP could be summoned, communicated with, controlled, and persuaded to land by deploying people with Zinnic abilities to interface and communicate with the UAP, and there were people who were purportedly genetically gifted who were brought into the program.
So Jake went from recovering UAPs to creating a project that can search, summon, and control them, finding psychics to help him do so along the way. Ladies and gentlemen,
a lot of people watching this are going, I'm sure, this is crazy, this guy's making this up, this can't possibly be true. Alien vehicles, psychic techniques to engage with technology, this is disinformation, fabrication. Well, we intend to prove that's not the case, which has a lot to do with the timing as to why I'm coming out now. We plan to produce that evidence in our new venture, with our teams that we've used for years. In the Legacy program, we've now gotten out and we've pulled our resources, and we're backed by venture capital. We're also working in coordination with the most forefront government agencies that you would want involved with us on this subject matter. And we're going to start producing evidence on all of this, and we're going to share it with.
And now his project is a well-funded operation cooperating with the government to provide proof.
We have an opportunity right now to work with the US government as a private partner. The place where we operate right now, we've been successful before in conducting our whole operation, all 5 phases of it. The US government has shown an interest. They know we're capable. They know what we've pulled out of the sky. It's consistent with the egg and everything else I've told you about. And what they're offering to do now is give us exclusive use access to facilities because they don't know what's going on. There are departments within the broader branches of the 3-letter agencies that aren't being read into what other sections are. So they want us to help because we're one of the few groups of people that have experience and we provide them a path to redemption. This is why no disclosure is coming. And guess what? It's going to come out in the most beautiful way. I believe the United States government in the next 12 months is going to use me and my team as a peaceful, non-judgmental path forward to disclosure. They're going to help us conduct our operations and gather evidence in order to present this subject matter to the public so that these questions can be answered once and for all. And all the questions. I'm talking about what do the craft look like? How do they operate? Who is operating them? How are they being operated? And where are they coming from? We should be able to answer those questions questions probably entirely in the next 12 months.
And now that he's working with former Senator turned Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he's got the Trump administration on his side. 2025 is going to be a very crazy year.
Hold on to your butts.
Real talk, this has got to be some of the most convincing shit I have ever seen. Not just because of Jake, but because of the people supporting and backing up his story. And I need to remind you, I only revealed just a small part of this. There are also mentions of secret organizations trying to kill Jake and his friends, psyops, and even some very unexpected types of people that can control alien spaceships with their mind.
Ha! Gay!
So make sure you go watch the full interviews and videos in the link down below. And most importantly, check out Saley eSIM, and shout out to them for sponsoring this video. Like, subscribe, and I will see you on the flip side. Peace!